Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Woody's Workshop. I know it's been a while since I uploaded last. I've been super busy, but I'm going to try and get back into the swing of things. I noticed the channel has grown substantially since I last uploaded, so I just wanted to take a second before I start this video to just say thank you to everyone who has, liked the videos, watched them, even subscribed to the channel, really, or commented anything. I really appreciate it, and I'm thankful that these videos have been helpful for some of you. So with that said, today I have a 2010 X5 that has a somewhat of a common issue. When these vehicles get up around 100,000 miles with that ZF 6HP transmission, so 6-speed ZF transmission, you can get hanging shifts. So the 1 to 2 or the 2 to 3 shift, it'll drag and you'll have to run it all the way up 4,000 RPM for it to finally, make that shift. Or you'll also notice when you come to a complete stop, you might feel kind of like a jolt, like someone just rolled into the back of you or just nudged you. And the reason for this is these seals, what is that, 5 seals here that mount between the valve body and the actual case of the transmission. Over time, these seals get compressed to the point where they don't hold pressure between the case and the valve body, and that pressure deviation is what's causing those delayed shifts and that jolt when you come to a stop. So to resolve this, what we do is we pretty much do a complete transmission service. Drain the transmission, remove the pan, remove the valve body, replace these seals, reinstall the valve body, install a new pan, and refill the transmission. So I would say the difficulty of this job is probably about, I don't know, a 5 or so. You don't need that many special tools. You will need a 1/4 inch torque wrench, both to torque the actual pan itself and the valve body. The valve body has a very specific torque sequence that you must follow. So I would say it's about a 5. The average at-home mechanic should be able to tackle this. So yeah, with all that said, let's get straight into the teardown. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a 10mm Allen. We're going to remove this plastic drain plug. Obviously this transmission is full of oil, so you will need a catch pan under it, or you will be taking an ATF shower, which is not enjoyable. So I highly recommend a drain pan. There we go. And I will let this sit for probably, it's a Saturday, I've got all day, so I'll probably let this sit for probably 30 minutes. Then I'll come back, pull the pan, let it sit for a while with the pan off as well. Just kind of let it drip. I don't like getting ATF all over me, so I will take my time. I'll let the pan drip. Now I'm going to reinstall the drain plug just so it's not dripping on me. With my drain plug back in, I'm ready to start to take the pan off. I like to remove all of the hardware towards the rear first and kind of drop it down to let it leak out of the back. You'll see what I mean here in a second. So before I take this last bolt out, I'm going to pull my drain pan kind of back underneath the rear of the pan, and we'll see why here in just 1 second. Well, I guess I was wrong. I let it drip for a while, so, oh, there we go. This kind of helps you avoid a little bit of a mess. And I'll let it sit like that for a minute before I take this all the way down. I've let all the fluid drain off the back of the pan here. If I pull it down, there's still a little bit, so you just got to be cautious when you take this last bolt out. that there is fluid still sitting in the pan. So now we have access to our valve body, obviously still dripping. I'll leave this sitting for probably an hour before I get under here, just because I don't want this all dripping in my face. It's kind of a theme here. If you don't want to deal with a huge mess, it's best to have, you know, several hours set aside to do this, just to let it sit. I don't really like getting oil all over myself, so I like to wait. So when I come back and this is all dry, I'll show you how to disconnect the mechatronics sealing sleeve, or the electrical connector. And from there, there's a couple different things you can do to deal with the parking linkage. I'll show you how to deal with that, and then we'll lower the valve body. So before we can remove the valve body, we need to disconnect this mechatronics connector, and we need to actually remove the sealing sleeve that houses the connector. To do this, you turn this little tab here. I'll point at it. This tab right here, you need to turn it counterclockwise, just like this. I use a long pry bar to do this. It's not normally that violent when you disconnect it. I just have a lot of stuff in the way behind the scenes, so it's kind of weird to get the pry bar in there. But once this is disconnected, you kind of just leave it dangling there. We still need to remove the other half. We need to pull this half out of the transmission. And the way we do that is this little white tab. You push the centerpiece here and slide it down, just like that. You see it slides. Slide it down. Then you take your pry bar again. Let's see if I can't get in here. Put it right there. Okay, so once you have that locked down, you disconnect the electrical connector, turn it counterclockwise. That little sleeve was pretty stuck in there, but it's loose now. Fitting it out of this space is tricky. You probably, once I put my hands up there, you're not going to be able to see how I get it out of there, but eventually you just kind of get it at the right angle. And there you go. That one came out very easy. A lot of times you don't have that much space in here, depending on the vehicle you're working on. But you can see the O-rings there that seal it to the case. This generally gets kind of a little mangled up, especially if it's been in there for a long time. Don't forget to leave this lock out. And with that out of the way, we can now start to unbolt the valve body. No matter how long you let this sit, there's still going to be drips. And there will still be some oil retained in this valve body, so when you do remove it, just know that there's going to be fluid, and this is pretty heavy. You don't want to leave it dangling off one bolt. I like to take these rear bolts out first, just because they're held into plastic for your solenoids, and I don't really want to put any unnecessary load on the plastic. When you're removing these bolts, only certain bolts get taken out of this. If you take the wrong bolts out, you're going to wish you hadn't, because you're going to have to be getting into the valve body at that point, and you really don't want to do that. So the bolts that have the larger heads, they're T40s, are the only ones that you remove. The ones with the shouldered edge, you do not. I'll show you this more clearly once I get it out. At this point, I don't want to wait any longer to drain this. It's just taking forever. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the valve body off. I just have 2 bolts remaining. It's probably going to be a little messy. I'm going to try to do this as gracefully as possible, but we'll see how it goes. Definitely going to get some oil on me. So with the valve body out of the way, you can see our 5 seals. Here's our bridge seal. You can just pop that off. Then here are our 4 round seals. You want to use a 90-degree pick to get these out, and you can see these are all super compressed, almost flush with the case of the transmission. So not doing a great job of sealing. If you're going to use a pick, you need to be really careful not to damage anything here. Obviously, same goes for here. These are machine surfaces. There needs to be no mistakes made here. You don't want to nick this or scratch it, so just be gentle. Alright, so now I'm going to take my bridge seal. This only goes on one way. I want to make sure that sealing surface is clean. Now I'm going to take my round seals, which you have 3 different sizes of these. Your long one goes on the driver's side. Then you have your medium one, which is the next one in. Then you have 2 shorter ones, which go on the passenger side. And you can just see how much more these are sticking out than the ones that I removed. Much more compression there, so it should seal up significantly better. With the new seals in place, I'm going to go ahead and grab my valve body. When you're reinstalling the valve body, you want to make sure that your parking pawl slides into the rod that's on the side of the valve body. It's going to be a little tricky for me to record this when I'm putting it up here, because I need to get up here and start the bolts. But once I get it started, I'll go over the torque sequence. I've got my mating surfaces all cleaned up on both the transmission side and the valve body side. Now I'm going to take my valve body, get it up there. Make sure your parking pawl is in the right location. Just get those snug enough to where your parking pawl is not going to retract. I've got the valve body up. I've got the parking pawl in the right location. Now I'm going to go through the torque sequence. The torque spec is 8 Newton meters. Before we reinstall the transmission pan, we need to install our sealing sleeve. See, there's a little notch on that. That notch Goes on the bottom side here. You'll need to use a pry bar to push this in. You can leverage it against the transfer case cross member. This can be a little tricky to get in, but you need to make sure it's fully seated before you push your locking tab back up. You can soft seat this and then push this in its place, and it'll leak and the connection won't be correct. So just take your time with this. It can be a little bit tricky. Also, one thing I forgot to mention here is you need to put grease on this. Not sure if the camera picked that up, but once you leverage your pry bar up there and it's lined up correctly and you push it in, you'll hear a little thud when it clicks and is bottomed out. Then you can push this lock straight up. Sometimes I like to take my pry bar and just kind of verify, make sure that it is seated correctly. Once you've got all this back together, you can reinstall this connector. You pull the lock down towards you or clockwise till it clicks. There we go. It's reconnected. At this point, we're ready to reinstall our pan. All right, so here's my pan. You can see the pickup there. I've got grease on the O-ring. You slide the bottom up, get it where it needs to be, and then push it. Now I'm going to torque the pan. You want to work your way across the fasteners. You do not want to torque it in a circle. The torque spec for these pans is 10 Newton meters. With our new pan in place, we want to now remove the fill plug. It's an 8mm Allen. You're gonna need a ratchet for this. These are generally pretty tight, and you will have a very hard time trying to do that with an Allen key. So you need to make sure that you have some type of ratchet. At this point, we are going to fill the transmission cold. I've got a little pump set up that I'll show you here in just a second, but we're going to fill it cold until oil flows out of this fill plug. At that time, we'll put the plug back in, then we'll come out, start the vehicle, put it in forward, put it in reverse, put it back in park, let it idle for about a minute. We're going to come back under the vehicle, pull the fill plug, and fill it with the transmission running until oil comes out of the fill plug, and then we'll put the plug back in and we'll be good to go. Here's my pump for filling the transmission. It's just like a 2.5 or 3 gallon container with a 12 volt scavenge pump. I bought this off Amazon. I want to say it was like maybe $20. I don't know, I think that's a stretch. It's some just cheap China pump, but it does the job. So essentially you just hook this up to a 12 volt power supply or any automotive battery. You have your pickup, you have your feed, it'll pump, and this is what I use to fill the transmission. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the cold fill right now. Now that we've done the fill with the vehicle off, I'm gonna hop up in the driver's seat, start it up, and I'll come back down and do the fill with it running. All right, so that's pretty much it. As you saw, I filled the transmission with the vehicle not running. Then I filled it with it running. You tell it's full by when oil runs out of the fill plug. So once you see oil running out of the fill plug, put the plug back in, you're good to go. I want to say that in most dealerships, independent shops, this is about a $750 to probably $1,200 repair. I think I have about $250 all in, including the little bilge pump that I'm using. I'll put the link to that in the description. I want to say I've used it probably on about 10 to 12 cars now. It's been pretty reliable thus far. For 20 bucks, I can't really complain. So as always, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I will catch you next time.